pay. It's kind of weird.
Yeah.
Because I want to send in like, all right, so this, so this slash works, and then I have slash here. Um,
Just two double quotes. There's a escape sequence called double quote.
okay, let's if I put in another one, oh, this should go here. That should go there. That should go there. No, so this slash works. You know, they're like us. Do I?
Yeah.
This is okay. This is so. What if I put like another quote here? If it lets me, um, do I? But then do I need to even put no 3 feet 7? I need that double quote. So,
So put
and can I
another
put?
single quote after it.
Okay, there we go. Jeez. All right. I think that might be acceptable. Okay, that's going to be a pain in the butt. I really didn't anticipate that. All right. So yeah, single quote. Then we'll see if it like actually likes that. Yeah, that's going to be weird, man. Glad I chose that. Yeah, for weight, we could just do 176.4. All right. But what did I put weight as? Did I put it as a do you want to remember what did I put weight as? Oh, I put it as a string. So, all right. Whoops. Let's just type it in 176.4. I could put since it's a string, I could put that. And for category, going back to star me, category, let's put mysterious. All right. Mysterious. All right. Yeah, star me, height, weight, category, mysterious. It's a post slash API Pokemon, raw JSON. Now if I hit send, um, is my server running? That should be the question. Okay, it restarted. And oh, what? Every this is gonna drive me crazy. This is I do prefer to work locally. I will say that because here's what's gonna happen. Do you see where every time I'm making an update, you see it's gonna restart the server, right? One of the things that happens when it restarts the server, guess what? It's gonna put that back to private. So I'm gonna have to change this back to public like every single time. And then like let me make sure. Okay, all right, now let's try it again. Okay, there we go. So Pokemon Star Me was added to our database, which is awesome. All right, so we know that it's working. I am curious to see how height is going to look. We'll see that in a second. But I have name, height, weight, category, and I was able, it did create the entry in my database for Star Me. But so now that we've done that, let's create another route, right? And let's create the get all Pokemon route, right? Because now that we actually have a Pokemon in our database, then this is why I like to do post first because I don't want to do get first because there's no information to get. I want to add information first and then make sure I can get said information. All right, so let's do slash API dot route. Um, let's do let's still do slash Pokemon because remember, since it's a RESTful API, we can do that. We can use the same route, right? But what dictates the functionality that we're going to access is the HTTP method that we're going to use. All right, so let's do methods and equals. In this particular instance, we're going to do get, all right? And you see the server's just restarting. Just, okay, it didn't go private that time. But it didn't say server restart yet. Anyway, I'll continue to check it. All right. And let's create our, let's call this get all Pokemon, right? All right, so there's nothing that we need to know params, right? All right, so this is where it's going to differ. So to get all Pokemon, we don't care. Well, we do, but we're not extracting information from the request body, right? Because this isn't we're here again. Remember, we were actually extracting information from the request body, because we were trying to create a Pokemon. Whenever we try to get Pokemon, it's all about the query, right? We're querying our database, and so the ORM makes it really simple for us, right? With the ORM, what we can do is let's first create a variable that's going to hold all of our Pokemon, right? And let's set it equal to, we reference our objects, our model, right? We reference our model, right? And then we're going to do dot query, right? And we're just going to do a query dot all. All right? Because, whoops, I almost added a semicolon, colon in. We're just going to do a query all, right? There's no qualifiers. There's nothing we need to query for. We just want to get everything from our Pokemon table in our database, right? And so that's what query dot all does. It returns everything. So we're going to run into a problem, but I'm going to just show you real quick. So let's do return, and we're going to JSONify. Let's call it, let's JSONify Pokemon, if I can spell, and let's send it back a 200 response. And I didn't even spell it right here. Jeez. All right, cool. This is going to cause an issue, or it should, but let's see if we have that functionality. So let's go to ports. No, it's still public. Okay, it actually works good. Let's do our GET request. I'm going to copy the same URL endpoint, and I'm going to paste it here, right? And there's nothing I need to put in the header, our body. This isn't going to be a GET request. I'm getting all Pokemon. I hit send, and it's going to be like, boom, object of type Pokemon is not JSON serializable, right? So this is actually an extra step that we need to take whenever we get everything back in Python, right? Because we're getting everything back. We're getting all Pokemon, back, and there's something special that we need to do with each Pokemon, and in order to actually return it, there's another step that we have to take. We need to map it out and create a list, a serialized list where each Pokemon object, that's returned is the serialized version of that Pokemon. And I know that, okay, so that sounds crazy, but ultimately, here's what I'm trying to do. Like right now, I have one Pokemon, right? But I'm going to want to have, eventually going to have multiple, right? This is the version of Pokemon that I want to return. So when I do get all Pokemon, I want it to go through, look at each Pokemon in my database, and I want it to return this serializable information for each Pokemon, right? And so in order for me to do that, I can't just do simply a query.all, right? And then to just return a JSONified, version of it. What I need to do is I need to serialize that information, right? I need to return this version of Pokemon, the serialized version of it, right?
Brent,
Yeah.
I'm wondering if when we say query all and we just print it, will we see? Like I can't wrap my head around what serialize does. Does it change the format? Does it string everything together?
So let's actually, that actually brings up a good point. So let's talk about it. So let's do. No, that's probably not the best. No, Okay, this is an interesting blog. All right. Let me see if this is actually what I'm looking for. Actually, let's do this. Let's do Flask serialized. All right. And let me see if it brings up the actual Flask. Actually, you know what? I can just go to Flask. Um, where is let's see if there's any. No. Let's just go here. All right. This is cool. All right. So in order to fully answer your question, right?
Mm-hmm.
Whenever so Python doesn't handle JSON all that well, right?
Okay.
So what we actually have to do, because remember, this is all Python code right here. So we go, from to our route, like to translate from Python code to JSON and JSON from Python code, it actually is a bit more involved. Than what you would normally do in just like JavaScript, right? So what the serializer does this really explain it that well? Like, okay, this I guess it kind of explains it. It probably would have been better, had I like I probably need like PyPy should be all right. Um, do, 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 do. Okay, it's probably not the best resources, but basically, what I have to do in order to turn this into JSON, because like in order for me to actually turn this into JSON, because Pokemon I think is going to be a Python dictionary, right? And so in order for me to JSONify it, then I have to the extra step involved in that will be for me to first serialize it.
Mm-hmm.
I guess in a nutshell, that's probably the easiest way to explain it. I can't just simply go from getting the results back from my query, and I can't just simply JSONify those results because, like, you see that that is said it's like, hey, it's not JSON serializable, so I can't just simply return those results. And so, in order to make it JSON serializable, then I first need to inside the model, create the function to serialize it, right? Which again returns a nice object, right? And then this serialized version, of my Pokemon, I can then JSONify it. I can return it in JSON format. So in Python, it's just an extra step that you actually have to do in order to return information in a JSON format. Does that make sense? I don't know if I butchered that or not.
It makes sense, yeah.
But it's
You'll
just
always deal with
okay,
JSON, right? Yeah.
right?
Hey Brent, the
What's that?
going back to your like your restaurant analogy, the serialized method on the model is like cooking it, right? Cooking your food. But now the serialized method allows you to eat it, so that's the waiter bringing it out to your table.
I love the way you continue with the analogy, but yeah, that is a really good way to put it. But yeah, in Flash, it's just this is a step that we have to take. We're going to be serializing. Whenever we get information, we're always going to have to serialize it first, and then, like I said, once we serialize or cook it, now we can eat it or return it in JSON format. Um, so this part actually is going to get a little tricky because let's create a list. So let's create our Pokemon list, right? And in order to create a list, or to turn something in a list, um, this creates our new empty list. Um, so and inside that list is going to be every Pokemon that we receive back, but the serialized version of it. Let me actually show you um, Lambda map serialize. Because this is basically what we're going to have to do. And I should have typed in Python. Where let's see if it I actually think 4Geeks has something on the 4Geek site. I think it has something really good about that. If you want like a really good reference, do they talk about the lambdas here? I almost remember it. Regardless, I don't want to spend too much time like looking for it. So follow me here. I don't want to get too far into it, but like here is what I'm going to have to accomplish. Every Pokemon that I receive back, I need to go through every one of those Pokemon that I receive back, and I need to serialize it, right? And then when I serialize it, I can JSONify it, right? So first thing I want to do is I want to create a list, right? Because I want it, this Pokemon list. I want it to be a list of all my Pokemon, but instead of in the normal format, I want it to be I wanted to take it because Pokemon contains you know all of my Pokemon from the database. But what I want Pokemon lists to actually contain is the same information, but only the serialized version of that of all my Pokemon. So therefore, I can JSONify it, and everything's good. So the way that I can do that is first I need to create a list, right? But what I need to do is, since this is ultimately going to contain multiple Pokemon, then I need to map through it. So let's talk about Python and map. So this is probably honestly like the hardest part of what we're going to do tonight. As far as like intermediate, or a beginner, like Flask, right? So what map does is, and maybe this isn't the best resource, but this is the first one that popped up. So it's a function. What I'm doing is I'm going over my iterable list, which is list, tuple, etc. Right. So what I'm going to do is, in order to go through each one of those values, then I'm going to need to map through it. All right. So let's do map, right? So because again, I want everything to be saved into a list, but I want to map through everything in Pokemon, right? But this is where I can get really fancy, and I can actually use a lambda, right? Because what we can actually do is what do I want to do? I have to provide some functionality of what I want to do when I map through every item, right? And so the functionality that I'm going to provide whenever I want to map through every item is first I need to say I'm using a lambda, but then what I'm going to do is every Pokemon, capital P, right, that I encounter, I'm going to turn it into the serialized version of itself. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, hey, every Pokemon that you encounter, what I want you to do is I want you to serialize it. So I could do, Pokemon dot, and then I can call on the serialize version. I want you to serialize it. So this is what I'm calling on. I'm calling on this function, the serialized function, right? And so what do I want you? Since I'm calling on serialize, what are we serializing? Well, we're serializing this, right? What contains this the query of all my Pokemon, right? So what I can actually do is I can reference this. I can reference Pokemon. Maybe I should call it Pokemons because it is going to be multiple. So that makes a lot more sense because this is going to be plural. It's going to contain all my Pokemons. So going through this again, I'm accessing the serialized function from my Pokemon model. And what am I doing with it? Well, I am serializing every single Pokemon in this that I received from the query. And so how am I going through everything in this list? Well, how am I going through all the Pokemon that will return from this query? Well, I need to map through it, right? And again, I want to keep it as a list, because I want, I don't want to just do one. I want it to contain all that Pokemon data, all that good Pokemon data. And now it's gonna be a list of all my Pokemon, but the serialized version of it, right? And so the list I'm iterating through is this one right here, which is Pokemons, right? So now, whenever I go to JSONify, if I JSONify Pokemon list, all right, and hopefully did it restart? Okay, it's still public. Now, when I go in and rerun this, and it didn't quite work out the way that I thought. I'll have to fix that for the next one. But now you see that I'm actually getting back. It is able to now, due to serialize, it is now able to return it in JSON format. So it's always just an extra step that you're going to have to do in Python. Whenever you get information, you're going to have to return the serialized version of that information. I can show you a really quick trick too, to maybe bypass that. But there is something that you can do, and maybe I'll show you on like the get the single one, right? But now, again, we have, now we can actually access, it actually accesses what we have inside of our database.
So, Brent, this would result in all, like, if someone had put in 20 Pokemons, it would result in, like, all 20 showing up, right?
Yeah. This is get all. And so, with the query.all, it's just pulling everything from that Pokemon table.
Okay.
So, if there were 20 Pokemon, it will return to all 20. But since there's only one, let's add another one. Because I need to kind of make up for, whatever this is. Whatever I did with the height. Let's add another one.
Okay.
Maybe you can, let's do, we could do Mr. Mime. Mr. Mime is a funny one. All right. 4'3". So let's do 4 foot. Let's get rid of this. And what if we just do this? I mean, we close it, but we do like 1, 2, and then that. Yeah, there we go. That looks better. And that should probably work. All right, we use single quotes, encase it in double quotes, and then, use single quote for our height references. All right, Mr. Mime, he weighs 120.2 pounds. And so let's do 120.2 pounds. And he is a barrier. I don't know what that means. Yeah, he's a okay. So he's a barrier. All right. So let's hit send, and Pokemon Mr. Mime was added to our database. Now, if we go back to get all, and we hit send, now we get we get the information for Mr. Mime. You know, which is kind of out of order. I can Let me actually see something. Usually ID is at the top. Did I do a serializer model? No, I put it first. Um, I don't know why it's not printing ID at the top, but that's not a big deal. How did I do the model? No, top. Okay, that doesn't matter though. But yeah, with get all, now I'm getting, of course, Star Me, and I'm getting Mr. Mime, which is actually a really good segue into the route that I like to do next, which is to get a single Pokemon, right? And so this is where the primary key comes into play, right? Um, because whenever we want to go and grab a single Pokemon, we want a way to uniquely identify a single Pokemon. Like we couldn't really do it, using name. Well, I guess we could, right? But like, a normal use case, name is something that you want to necessarily do, because like imagine like if there's a Pokemon with the same name, then you don't have a way to uniquely identify. Which is why the primary key is usually just an integer that increases in value, right? And so I want to use that. I want to leverage that in order to get a single Pokemon, right? And so what I'm going to do is kind of like I've been doing before is I'm going to do /API. Let's do routes, right? And my URL endpoint is actually going to change a little bit. So I still want to do /Pokemon, right? But I need to get information. And the information that I need to get in this particular case would be the ID of the Pokemon that I'm currently trying to get the information for. And how do I get that information? Well, this is where REST comes into play because I can extract a lot of information from the URL itself, right? And so what I'm thinking is if I want to get an individual Pokemon, then I could just, add a slash after Pokemon and then have a place for ID, be it one or, well, I'll just have one or two right now. But this is, I can use that to access, to know, the ID of the Pokemon that I'm trying to access. And so let's actually do that, right? And so in order for me, the put in that, to extract that information, from the URL, the first thing is I need to, properly define the URL, right? And the way that you actually do it in Python is you can use your angle bracket, right? And the information that we're extracting is an integer, right? And then we need to give it a name. And so let's just call it ID because that's what we're trying to access, right? Close my angle bracket, and there we go. And so now I can put in my methods, right? And this is going to be gets, right? So let's create our let's say get a Pokemon. And my names are pretty bad tonight. But if we want to get a Pokemon, right, then we actually, now we actually have a parameter that we need to pass in, right? And the information that we want to pass into this function is the ID of the Pokemon that we want to get the information from. So we're just going to reference ID. All right. And so now what we can do is let's create a variable. Let's call it Pokemon, right? And let's reference our model, so Pokemon dots, and our query actually changes. And this has actually been a really relatively new update. I guess somewhat new. To the query syntax, because like now we can use is the syntax is query is query no, okay, no, query get R404. So either we're going to get something back from the query, or we're going to get a 404 back, which is actually pretty cool, because that I'm fine with that. Like either we get we get a Pokemon back, or we get a 404 object, not found. So query gets R404, and inside of this query, we're going to pass in ID. And where are we getting that ID from? Well, we're getting that ID from the end of this portion of our URL, right? So if we want to get a single Pokemon, it's going to be /API/Pokemon/ whatever ID we're looking to get. All right. So Pokemon query R404, right? What we can then do is let's just let's return Pokemon. But like well, actually, let's see something. Let's see something. So let's JSONify and Pokemon. And all right, and let's actually see let's see what this does. Let's see what we get back. I'm actually let's see. So let's copy this and let's put it in one. Maybe I spelled that. Let's do. Whoops. Query R get 404. Got get R404. So I'm expanding. All right, let me see it. Did I spell something wrong? Okay, I did query. Oh, sorry. Dot. Query dot get R404. Sorry. See, yeah. We still need to serialize. So actually, I don't need to really map. So I can just serialize here, and let's see. There we go. All right. So Pokemon 1 was actually Starmie. I want to see if we actually get the 404. So I'm gonna put in. We don't have a Pokemon that with an ID of 3, and yeah, we do. 404 not found. All right, neat. That's when planning this out, I was like, okay, query 404. That's actually really cool. But I never tried to see if we actually get a 404 back, right? So the requested URL is not found on the server, so we do get a 404 not found. All right, so that actually eliminates a lot, because we don't need to with the query or get 404, we don't actually need to generate an API exception now, because like it already does a 404 for us, and I'm actually happy with that. So that actually saves us a little bit of code, you know. So hey, yeah, that's actually really really cool. All right, but like to go back over this particular URL endpoint, like we're obviously the method is gets, right, and the endpoint is /Pokemon, right, but we have information that we want to extract. Specifically, the information that we want to extract is whatever numbers here is going to correspond to an ID, right? So let me put in 2, right? It's going to correspond to ID of a Pokemon. So what it is querying our database, right? And it's looking, is looking for the ID, the ID of, in this case, 2, right? So it's going to query, we're going to either get a Pokemon back, or we're going to get a 404, right? If the Pokemon doesn't exist. All right. So the Pokemon is going to be saved, of course, in this variable. And so then we just need to serialize it. The Pokemon, that we get back, we just need to serialize it, right? And the cool part is you know, even it'll serialize the Pokemon, but it will still return us a nice 404, if the Pokemon's not found. So I think that's actually kind of neat. Um, but that actually should be good, for us to actually get a single Pokemon. So where are we at in our CRUD functionality? We have create here, which is post. We have read, which is our get methods. So that's the R. So we can get all Pokemon, or we can get a single Pokemon. So the only functionality that we're left with is update and delete. All right. I know it's 8:41. I'll try to make it quick. There's a lot that we can get into. I know some people are like logging out. It's like, dude, it's almost 9 o'clock. So let's for the sake of time, let's like speed this up. All right. So I'm going to change this to put. I still want the same URL endpoint, right? But this is going to be what I use to actually update a Pokemon, right? So what I'm going to need to do in order to update a Pokemon, right, is I'm still going to do the query 404. I'm still going to do the query based off the ID, right? But what I'm going to do is now I need to, like in post, I'm going to be sending in information via the body of the request. So I'm just going to, what I did in post, I'm just going to copy down, right? And so I'm going to be looking to see what I updated, right? And so, for the sake of time, let's just make this quick. So I'm going to say like if name, height, weight category. All right. So let's do if name in RB. Then what I can do is, I can do, Pokemon dot name is going to be equal to, RB name. All right. I'm going to copy this all down for each of it. So let's do one for height. So Pokemon.height. And let's change this to height. Let's do one for weight. Change this to Pokemon.weight. And let's change this to weight. And category. Do category. And let's do category. All right. So I've actually made a change to the database, right? So if we look at what we did in post, where we did db session.add, db session.commit, we don't need to do db session.add, but we do need to do a db session.commit. So let's do db let's do a db session dot commits. All right. All right. Because we've updated the Pokemon, and now we're going to commit that, to our actual database. And whatever we're going to return, we can return Pokemon serialized with the updated information. And let me change this method name so we can actually test it out. All right. We haven't done the functionality yet, but we will. All right. So yeah, now my server's running. Still public. So yeah, let's test it out. All right, so let's copy this. We're going to change this method to puts, and we're going to do 2, right? And what we're going to do, actually, you know what? Let's fix star me, like the height. So we're going to do body, raw, JSON, and, let's fix height. And star me's height, let's go back to previous. All right, it had the slash in it, so let's do 3'7". So let's do this. Do 3'07", double, and then close it out. All right. Let's hit send. And there we go. That slash is gone, and now we have 3'7" there. So that has been updated for StarMe. Pressing on because I know we're it's way longer than we have. Let's do delete. And so the URL endpoint for delete is going to be the same as the one that I would use for to get a single Pokemon or to update a Pokemon. Because delete, we also need an ID because we need the ID of the Pokemon that we actually want to delete. All right. So create our function, delete a Pokemon. We can still do a query or get 404. That still works. So what we're going to actually do is we're going to do db.session dot. There's actually a delete method here. All right. So we're going to delete the Pokemon that we just found. Right. Whoops. And then we can do db.session.commit. And let's instead of JSONified version, let's just return the F string here, and let's say Pokemon, and let's do Pokemon.name was deleted, and 200 response. All right. Yeah, that should be good. We committed our session. We deleted. Oh, I don't need to JSONify anything. I just extracted the name. Let's create one more on Postman. Let's see if we can delete our Pokemon. Let's change this to delete. Put in our URL endpoint. Let's delete Pokemon 2, and let's hit send. Did my server restart? It sure did. All right, public. There we go. And let's give it a second to spin up. Yep, it's running. All right, now let's hit send. And Mr. Mime is gone. Mr. Mime has been deleted. All right. Yeah, so this is a full REST API with CRUD functionality. We have our create and post. We have our our read in both of our gets. We can get all Pokemon or a single Pokemon. We have our update with this put method with this puts, and then we have our delete with delete. And so that really is that's really all there is. To your basic REST API. With CRUD functionality. It doesn't get much harder than that, especially when you're just doing basic CRUD, meaning updating, actually, creating and updating and deleting, our database, specifically the Pokemon table. All right. I know it took long, but any questions?
No questions. I think reviewing this will be very helpful. Thank you, friend.
Okay, yeah, no problem. No problem at all. All right. Yeah, it's been fun. That again, the demo took way longer than I thought. It didn't take too long. It's only 8:48. Only 8:48. But yeah, like whenever you're working with this template, that really does make it really easy. And
I have a quick question if you don't mind.
yeah, sure.
So when you're going to go and connect this API to the front end, how do you do that?
It's a good question. So what you would do is, all right, this you see this address that I use, and this is only because it's on on Code Spaces. So what I would do in order to connect to interact with this API is actually, you know what, I can actually show you. And again, this is extra in case anyone wants to log out. Thank you for attending, but yeah, let's do this. All right, so good old React. So let's do later. Let's just create a new component real quick. and let's call it like Poke Card JSX. All right. All right. And I won't execute it all the way, but let's import React from React. Whoops. Let's do const. Let's call it Poke Card. And let's do this. I like to use Axios, so I'm gonna import Axios from Axios. Again, Axios and Fetch, they both work the same way. But what I would do is if I want to interact with it, then let's create another arrow function. Let's call it like get Pokemon info, right? And there's nothing so we're going to do an Axios.get, right? And what we're going to do is we're going to do a get to this. So in code spaces, it's a little misleading, but like I would make an Axios call to the address that this current server's on, right? Now, normally it's just going to be something, port 3000. Usually it's like 127.0.0.1 on port 3000 because it's going to be running, on your local machine, on your local server, But in this particular case, the way that I access it is using, since this is code spaces, this is what I have to use. This URL is what I have to use to access it, right? So I'm going to paste all of that in, right? And again, this is Axios.get request, right? After after the .get, let's do a .then, and let's response, and let's do this. Let's just console log our response, all right? And you know what? And this is a get all, Pokemon. And we're just gonna console log it, and let's just put it in return. And we're just honestly, I'm just gonna put in for the sake of time, I'm just gonna put an empty div. Let's just do that. Well, my mouse is just one scroll everywhere. Let's tab this over. And here's like let's just put like a I don't know, a p tag. Pokemon info. All right. And in order to run this, let's throw it in a use effect. All right. Yeah. So let's just whoops. I'm sorry. I keep brushing my mouse with my like fat hand. So let's do a use effect. All right. And inside the use effect, let's just run get Pokemon info. All right. And this should be good. Okay. Const get Pokemon info. All right. Let's go to app. Inside app, I'm just going to comment all of this out. And I'm going to import PokeCard. Whoops. Well, first, it would help if I exported it. Save that. All right. And so now I can import PokeCard and it'll find it. All right. And now I'm going to reference it. PokeCard. And let's close it. And let's save that. And let's do npm run start. All right. Let's, hopefully there's no errors. All right, so we know that we're accessing the right component because it shows Pokemon info. And if we look here, then inside of the data portion of of our because we made our request here using Axios, right? So the request part is what was happening as far as like the workflow. This is our front end. This is React, so this is our front end, and so we're making a GET request to our backend endpoint. All right. So since our backend server is running, what's happening is based off the URL based off the URL and the nature of the request, it knows exactly what functionality to access. So since we're sending a GET request, right, to this URL endpoint / Pokemon, then it knows to query the database and return the serialized list of all of my Pokemon. Let me actually add another Pokemon. Let me actually add another Pokemon. I'm gonna call this Mr. B, and let's do Mr. C. And lastly, let's do Mr. D. I know these aren't Pokemon, but sorry for the sake of time, right? Now, all of this information exists inside of my database, right? All A, B, C, D, all those Mr. A, B, C, D, they all exist inside of my database, right? And so on the front end, whenever I make my API call, and I'm making my API call, I can use Axios or Fetch. Whenever I make my API call, what it does is it accesses my backend server, right? And specifically, it knows what functionality to access, again, via the URL endpoint and the method of the request. The method of this request is GET, and I'm making, my API endpoint is / Pokemon. So it knows, it's like, okay, this is the functionality that I need to access. Get all Pokemon. So it's going to query it all, it's going to serialize it, and it's going to return the JSON version of that list. And that's what you're doing with a RESTful API, front end and back end. On the front end is where you're actually going to make a call to get that information, right? So if I go back to my browser and I now refresh it, right, then you see that inside of my data, then you see I have Starmie, I have Mr. B, Mr. C, and Mr. D there because, again, it's just grabbing that functionality directly from, it's calling on this functionality, which pings my database and which returns, my request is returned with this response, the JSONified version of all of my Pokemon. So then what I would then have to do on my front end would be to, I could do a lot of things, with this, I could do a lot of things with this information now, right? I have the information, it's in my front end, I could save it into state. I could display it as a card. I could make it, basically I'm going to make it pretty, on the front end, all right? But, the way that I'm going to get this information and the way this whole thing works is, once I create my back end, on the front end, I'm just going to be making calls to my back end, requesting that information. It's going to send that information to my front end. And then, it's the job of the front end, to make it pretty, to make it, digestible, for the user to see, but as far as how I get it to the front end, it all starts with, if I go back to the code, it all starts with, me making the request. And what allows me to make the request is either Fetch or Axios. Did that answer your question?
Yes, that answered my question. I appreciate it.
Okay. All right. Yeah. Any other questions? All right. Hey, y'all are some troopers for sticking around this long. Again, I really didn't anticipate it would take it to 9 o'clock. So those of you that left, that are left, like I said, I really, really appreciate it. Yeah, I love the code. This is fun for me to do. Again, I'm a boot camp graduate. I still have a lot to learn. So I'm learning, every day. But I feel like, if you approach everything with the right mentality, in this career field, then it all falls into place. Like if you would have asked me like 3 years ago, when I first started this journey, you know, I would have told you that my goals would have been to like, get some experience, maybe a FANG job, but honestly, those it's just that it's just a goal, like when it actually happens and when your goals fall into place, it really does feel great. But again, you're not going to accomplish it without, hard work and, just, like putting in the work, to learn your craft. And by you showing up tonight, which was completely optional, you're like us, I imagine that you definitely have that mentality. So yeah, it's been a pleasure. I'll stay behind, a bit longer if anyone, has some questions. But I'm gonna stop the actual, I'm gonna stop the actual record portion of it because